I am Patrick Cawley with Keystone Elder Law, and this is Keynotes, a series of conversations about issues affecting the elderly, people with special needs, and veterans of the armed forces. I'm joined today by Danny Osten, who heads up the office in Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, that serves veterans. Danny, I've heard you speak a couple of times, and I'm always struck by your passion for the job that you are doing and your commitment to getting the word out to veterans in any way that you can. I've heard you say, I'll go to their house and I'll tell them about the benefits that are available to them. Thank you for being here. And please just tell me a little bit about your background. I know you are a veteran yourself. Tell me a little bit about how you came into this role.
Well, thank you for having me here. This is a great opportunity to get the word out. That's certainly something, as we'll touch on a little later, that is lacking in the veteran community. But so my background, I grew up in a small farm in northwestern Pennsylvania. My grandparents and his brothers and sisters, they all had joined the service during World War II and did their part. And when my turn came, I joined the Navy, much like many of them did. Served my time, was in the Persian Gulf in '87 during what was called at that time the Tanker War. We escorted Kuwaiti tankers in and out of the Gulf, sometimes in some combat situations. And so it was an interesting place for an 18-year-old kid fresh off the farm. So after my 4 years, I came back and worked in manufacturing. And as manufacturing goes in this country, I ended up going to nursing school. Worked at Hershey Medical and Labor and Delivery for a while. And roundaboutly came into an opportunity to work with the American Legion in their Veterans Services Department. So I was responsible for the whole state, and we had 25 service officers to cover various offices throughout the state. And it's all about connecting veterans with the benefits that they are eligible for and have earned. There's so many benefits, and every day I'm meeting veterans that should have been getting a benefit from the VA for years and have not been, had no idea they were eligible for it. So that's the bridge we're trying to connect.
And you're doing that now within Cumberland County government. So tell me about that office, where it's located, what kind of staff is there, and just some typical situations as far as veterans in the county. And I understand there are about 22,000 veterans in Cumberland County. When they come to your office, what are they seeking, and how is your staff set up to deliver services to them?
So just because of the depth of the benefits, it's really kind of hard to be an expert on one, if you will. So there's a lot of like real-time research that happens, but very often, so our office is located in Carlisle. In the past, the office had been very, I'll call it passive. They relied on the veteran to come to the office. Really trying to change that, because Carlisle is not the easiest town to get around it. Parking is difficult. Many veterans are handicapped at some level, and our office is not very close to parking. So with that said, we're trying to get into what we call outreach and go to posts or state representatives' offices out in the communities. And it's just easier for the veteran to come to that location. And it's already paid off in the very short amount of time we're doing it. So I have myself. Sharon McLaughlin is also a service officer in the office. And Lynette Hoke, she is our administrative person. She's the first point of contact in the office. So a typical, there really isn't a typical even. Some vets come in and know what they're looking for. But some, I'll just give an example. About 2 weeks ago, I had a call. Somebody wanted help for their husband who was going to dialysis. They just needed some transportation help. Well, through the trying to figure out the background part of this, they should have been getting a benefit from the VA for about 15 years. And to put some monetary value on that, a 10% claim is about $140. 100% claim is around $3,200. And that's every month for the rest of their life. And not only that, if they die from something that is service connected, that benefit goes to the spouse, and she will get a sum of money right around $1,400 for the rest of her life. And that just scratches the surface, believe it or not, of the benefits available for us. And this particular individual was a Vietnam veteran, had Agent Orange exposure, and that's a whole nother panacea of claims. But that's
So,
very common, actually.
and you touched on you used to work for the American Legion, and you touched on the posts. So those are some other resources. If people who are veterans do not come to your office, there are other resources locally. Can you just briefly give a rundown of what those are and what they provide?
Sure. So the service organizations, and there's many. There's the American Legion, VFW, AMVETS, and disabled vets. Those are the big ones, but there's many other small ones. In Pennsylvania, there is something called the Law About Small Games of Chance. And that's those little pull-off tickets and scratch-offs and raffles and things. They have to, by law, and I think it's 60% of the money they take in has to be given out in their local communities. But somebody has to ask for it, and nobody knows it's there. So every post is different. I have to say that out front. But the local posts offer huge amounts of day-to-day help, we'll call it, to veterans. And one thing we've talked about in the past, down in Newville, I had a veteran call me. He was disabled, had stepped on his porch and put his foot down through a step, and he could not fix it monetarily and physically. So I called the local American Legion post just a mile down the road from him, and he had no idea what they do. They came out that day and fixed it for free. This guy was just blown away. And that's a common story. I tell it all the time because people just have they think of the Legion VFW as nothing more than a smoke-filled bar. It is so much more than that. So I really encourage families of veterans even to go down there, be a part of them. It's a great way to give back to your community, help the veterans in your area. It's a huge organization.
I love that story, and I love that there are an array of options and they're sitting on resources. So really all it takes is outreach and education of the community, which hopefully people will get from this conversation with you and from all of your efforts, your extensive efforts to educate people. Because that amount, the service-connected disability amount that you discussed, and any sort of survivor benefit for the spouse, that can be life-changing. And we often encounter this at Keystone Elder Law when somebody has gotten a diagnosis of, say, dementia or they've gotten Parkinson's or some other disease, and they're looking at long-term care at some point in their future. We always ask about any sort of military service, and we start to go down that road to do the same thing you're doing, to uncover what might be a reason for a benefit. And it just changes everything, because they're talking to us because they are very fearful that the healthcare costs are going to bankrupt them. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And on that note, we'll just do a quick rundown of some of the benefits that are available. You said it's extensive. You said it's tough to be an expert on all of them. So today we won't go into any great detail. I'm really much more knowledgeable about the pension benefits than some of the other benefits that you can probably rattle off. But we'll just give people an overview of some of the benefits that are out there. And I'm sure light bulbs will go off in the minds of people who are hearing this. So I guess to start out with, there's VA healthcare. And I guess for a while now, if you don't have a service-connected disability, or you have a disability but the rating is 0%, it's means tested for veterans, meaning they have to be below certain resources. You know, they can't be wealthy and get that health care. Am I right about that, or what can you tell me about the health care generally?
Well, once you become service connected, 0% or otherwise, you're automatically enrolled in the VA healthcare. Now, the means test comes in two different ways. If you are not service connected, there's a means test to see if you can get the benefit at all. If you are service connected, the means test relates to whether you pay a copay or not. So if it's I forget the number. I think it's if you're below 30%, and I think it's around $50,000 a year, you're going to pay a copay. But the copay is still far less than any uh, private uh, private insurance copay, and there's no monthly charge for the insurance. It's the insurance itself is free.
Okay, so my summary didn't do it justice. That's a much better explanation. So getting into some other specific benefits, there's, you already touched on this, there's disability compensation. So if you have a service-connected disability, and I think sometimes people think, well, you know, I never got shrapnel in combat, but it doesn't really have to just be that. It could be you developed hypertension during your active duty, during your service, and that's a service-connected disability. But so from that standpoint, it becomes sort of almost like workers' compensation if people understand that concept, where you know you developed a condition on the job and there are disability compensation benefits available. Tell me a little bit about that.
You know, and those can be sometimes like, let's say you fell out of the back of a truck and twisted your knee, or during a PT test you blew out an ACL or something, and that comes back in life to you know bother you, as it will. Then you're right, that is a claim to the VA, and they look for three things. One, that there was an incident in service that this started or got worse. You have been treated for this over time, and you have the current diagnosis. If those three things are met, it's automatic. And then if you're on another layer, if there's certain situations, if you served in Camp Lejeune as a Marine or any service member, actually, if you were in Vietnam, those are a list of diseases that just by that service time, you are automatically eligible for this short list of diseases, which you can look up online pretty easily. If you have that disease, if you served time in Vietnam or Camp Lejeune or wherever, it's automatic.
In automatic meaning you don't have to engage in an extensive documentation of how you got sick and link it up with your service. It's just sort of assumed that if you served there, you've satisfied that element of getting the benefits. And
a very common Agent Orange, couple of Agent Orange diseases that are very common: diabetes, heart disease. If I can show you have diabetes today, you served in Vietnam if you were on boots on the ground in Vietnam for 10 minutes, you are getting that claim.
That's great. So moving on from the disability compensation, there's a pension benefit as well. So this is separate and apart from developing a medical or an injury or a medical condition that's directly related to service, but people who served for 90 or more days of active duty military service, discharged other than dishonorable, there's a benefit. And for us at Keystone Elder Law, this often comes up in the context of people needing the highest level of pension benefit, which is called aid and attendance, where they're looking at nursing home care and they are really debilitated. But it also affects their spouse. There are ways for the spouse to take advantage of that pension benefit of the service member. So tell us a little bit about pension benefits and how that comes into play.
Yeah, so the pension benefits are income-based, but if they are going into a nursing home, or even if they have homebound care, that amount that it costs for that care is deducted from their income. So that typically puts them under the threshold, unless their income is pretty large. So that provides, I think for the veteran, it's around $1,800 a month. For the spouse, it's around $1,400 a month. Now, this is one important note. As long as the veteran is alive, the benefit goes to that person. Once the veteran passes away, it falls to the spouse, but they cannot both get it at the same time.
And every little bit helps. I can certainly tell from our experience that the cost of any even independent living or assisted living, nobody's getting Medicaid for that. If their income and their assets are pretty low, they're not getting Medicaid for that. That's confined to the highest level of care. And if you're looking at the highest level of care where aid and attendance would be relevant, $10,000 a month is nothing in Cumberland County, and that goes up all the time. So unless people have close to $150,000 in cash sitting around every single year to pay for that care, they're looking to governmental benefits that are really intended for people to help people in sort of middle-class families. And I'm glad that you brought up how the pension benefit works for the service member, and upon the service member's death for the spouse, potentially to help with those crushing costs of care that many people need with our ever-increasing aging population.
Right. And it just to throw in on that a little bit, there is a benefit for them to be at home and receive care. It's called the Homebound Benefit. It's a little less, but so is the cost of that care. So either way, it's very helpful to a family to, let's say they need just a couple things with help during the day. They don't need 24/7. That can be, like you say, life-changing to help them stay at home and be at home as long as they can be.
Right, and the surveys that have been done by the likes of AARP and other organizations show that the vast majority of people would prefer to age in their homes and not to have to go into a facility. That's probably even more the case now as we record this conversation in the spring of 2020, when being in a facility means you're segregated from your family. You can't see them. You can't even really interact with the other residents of the facility because of coronavirus lockdowns. So people want that home care. It's significantly less expensive than facility care, and it's what people want, and what you're describing will help them to get that care. So shifting gears a bit, there are death and burial benefits from the VA. So VA national cemeteries having the help with the cost of a headstone or a marker, a flag to drape over the casket. These are all benefits that are available from the VA.
That is correct. In burial in the National Cemetery, the plot, all of those associated costs are covered by the VA. You still have to pay for the funeral home viewing, or if it's the cremation, that sort of thing. But the burial process itself is covered.
Okay.
And there also is they do a really nice ceremony, an honor guard type of thing. It's great for the family. I myself used that when my father passed away. It's just a great way to give back to them, to what they did.
Absolutely. Let's talk about shifting gears again away from sort of healthcare injuries and death. We can talk about something that might seem a bit more relevant to younger veterans. There's all kinds of help with education and training. So I know that at various periods in our history, we've had a GI Bill. So there was a GI Bill that applied to Vietnam era service members, and then there's one from 1985 on. I don't know the details as well as I'm sure you do, but could you just give a little information about money that's available for education and training?
Yeah, so you're right. It depended on what era you served, and there was a different level of benefit that you could receive. The post 9/11 benefit is the highest. That is, it's probably more relevant today than any. And that's just something they'd have to either come talk to us, or I always actually send them to the college they're looking at going to. Every educational campus has a veteran service representative, and that's all they deal with, the education benefit. They are experts in that. So they're really the person to talk to, and they can give them the best bang for their buck, if you will.
That's great to know. And along the same line, there are vocational rehabilitation sorts of benefits where the idea is to help veterans to prepare for and then to get and keep suitable employment for them. So just basically increasing the chances of successful employment for veterans. Can you tell me about that?
Right, yeah, so let's just, let's say I was a heavy equipment operator, but I have a disability now that is going to permit or disqualify me for that sort of vocation. Well, the VA, through their Vocational Rehabilitation Group, will work at training me for another job an employment line that I can do with my current disability. So it's a great way to just be retrained into something more relevant that is doable without me being, stuck at home and having to draw this, unemployment or their disability benefits or whatever, and rely on that totally. It lets them be a part of, to give back still. And most people want to contribute,
They do. I think that's just a basic need that people have, is to have their mind and their body engaged in something productive. And rather than just getting a benefit that sustains them in the present time, that sets them up for long-term success.
Right.
And sky's the limit at that point. So that's great. And along the sort of same lines of sustaining service members, reservists, and veterans, the VA guarantees part of a home loan, doesn't it, for people who are looking for a new home?
Yes, if they have you have to have an honorable discharge, meet a few little criteria points, but yes, they will. The VA home loan guarantee will help individuals buy a loan. There's no down payment required. There's very few fees involved. It's a pretty easy process. Anybody's realtor or the banking institution itself, they can help you get that started, help you with the paperwork of that, and it's a pretty easy process. I went through it myself years ago.
Great. Danny, on any one of these subjects, I'm sure you could talk at greater length, and I'd love to do this again where you can talk about specific kinds of benefits, especially if we start getting feedback after I post this video. And I invite people to get in touch with us either on the social media pages for Keystone Elder Law. This will be on our YouTube channel and other places, or you can contact us at keystoneelderlaw.com, and I will be sure to get the questions to Danny, and we can do a follow-up and maybe get some more answers to those questions from you. So thank you so much for joining me. This has been incredibly helpful, I think, for a lot of people out there.
You're very welcome, and thank you for this opportunity. Prior to this whole COVID stay-at-home situation, we had started a series of town hall meetings throughout Cumberland County with the sole purpose of getting the word out of these benefits, because, again, nobody knows. So I don't want them to find out through their buddy at the pizza shop or wherever. They need to come. They need to know. They need to come talk to us, and we'll be happy to help.
That's great. Thanks again, Danny.
You're welcome. Take care.